Hello everyone, my name is Margaret Gratz, and today I will be presenting a literature review entitled The Theory of Planned Behavior Behind Prison Walls. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics in 2005, violent offenders, were victims of 61% of the prison homicides. My thesis is that violence is very common in correctional facilities all over the world, and the theory of planned behavior is a good model for predicting prison misbehavior and violence. The reason that I'm so interested in this theory is because I am the founder and CEO of Make It Incorporated. I work with ex-offenders on a daily basis in regards to the barriers they face in their transition. I am also the president of a student organization on this campus, United Purpose 2, where we aid and assist ex-offenders from the prison with their transition onto this campus as a whole. Before I go into detail of my main points today being discussed, I will provide you a definition and figure of the theory of planned behavior, leading you into the main points of the attitude towards violence, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control. To get a clearer understanding of what the theory of planned behavior control, let's take a look at the diagram here on the PowerPoint. The theory of planned behavior was developed by Martin Fishbein and Isaac Aisling in 1975. Stated by ComGap in the Theories of Behavior Change publication, the theory of planned behavior proposes that the behavior is dependent on the intention to carry out the behavior. Intention is governed by an individual's attitudes, beliefs, values about what the outcome of the behavior and subjective norms, beliefs about what other people think the people should do, or general peer or pressure from society. Behavior is also determined by an individual's perceived behavioral control, which is a person's thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes about their own ability or feeling of self-efficacy to perform a behavior. All of these theories of planned behavior variables are affected by the situation. Let's begin to start looking at what the researchers have found in regards to attitudes towards violence. According to Pearson and Nelson, 2000, attitude is a predisposition to respond favorably or unfavorably to a person, an object, an idea, or an event. The theory of planned behavior was introduced by Olson and Ireland in 2011. It showed that reports of bullying in prison and the fear of the inmate was caused by aggressive motivation and prison victimization. Patrick, 1998, proved support for two of his hypotheses that state A, the less the inmate feels safe, the more likely there will be fights, and B, the more force that prison staff uses on inmates, the more staff confrontation, fights, and disputes there will be. Allison and Ireland, 2010, also found that there were reactive as well as proactive factors independently related to aggressive motivation. Overall, these three studies found that aggressive behaviors were the cause of prison misbehavior and violence. Now that we've looked at the motivational behavioral factors that examine their attitudes towards the particular behaviors, let's take a look at the demographics. Subjective norm. It's a person's perception about a particular behavior that is influenced by the judgment of people who are significant in their lives, such as demographics related to age, race, institutional records, criminal history, and education of prison inmates. Research on demographics of inmates shows how their behavior can be influenced. Warhol and Morris, 2012, used prisoner demographics and importation perspective with variables such as values, age, race ratio, criminal history, employment, lack of education, to just name a few. Avicino and Bacon 2003 added a few more demographics using marital status, employment records, maternity status, to their list of characteristic as well as demographic variables. Jensen and Jones, 1976, found that demographics as well as criminal history of the female inmates explained more to them in regards to what the female inmates' outlook was on prison life. Egan and Beedman, 2011, found that personality traits make up resilience in antisocial personalities with prior records of gang affiliations, all of which are elements that lead to prison misbehavior and violence. The demographic variables in this research studies are shown to be subjective norms in the theory of planned behavior. After looking at the demographic factors that are in the list of subjective norm elements were found in prison research, we will now take a deeper look into the prison environment and how it explains the perceived behavioral control of the theory of planned behavior. Perceived behavioral control is a person's ease or difficulty in performing a particular behavior. Research on the prison social environment suggests that misbehavior and violence is related to relationships and environmental strain, stress, and adaptation. Warhol and Morris, 2012, found that there was an association between certain gang memberships and interaction of inmates misbehaving in prison. Morris et al., 2012, found that environmental strain played a major role in which group the male inmate fell into. Di Vigiani, 2012, used variables such as prison relationship, prison talk, the reputation, legitimacy, vulnerability even, common ground in the sick role, to prove how prison masculinities, being the tough guy, the bully, or just even having that type of persona, were produced, performed, and reproduced as well. Leibling and Arnold, 2012, found low levels of trust, broken social relationships, and a diminished prison chain. They also looked how prison forces were indicators of the way that inmates reacted on the typical length of their sentences and the fear that they had to encounter. Inmates encountered a lot of staff position confusion when that took place, even in regards to religious beliefs. Indicators of anxiety and social misfortune were also found. Olson and Ireland, 2011, used the theory of planned behavior to prove aggressive motivation and offense motivation. Their reports show that bullying behaviors were a greater predictor of the levels of fear in the presence of prison environment elements due to the reports on victimization. In summary, the theory of planned behavior shows that behavior is dependent on a person's intention to carry out the behavior. The research we just went over shows motivational and behavioral factors, demographics as a variable measured, and finally how the prison environment is related to the perceived behavioral control. Overall, research suggests that motives, attitudes, and beliefs towards aggression and motivation may be good predictors of misbehavior and violence in prison. Finally, environmental strain, prison adaptation, social relationships, inmate to inmate, even inmate to staff relationships in research showed those perceived behavioral control factors in the prison environment. Clearly, the theory of planned behavior is very, very important in the prediction of what goes on in the prison facilities and could definitely add to the understanding of why there is so much violence going on behind the walls. This brings me to my hypothesis. I hypothesize that attitudes, motives, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control will predict inmate behavior. While these articles did a very fair job using several methods to obtain their data collection, there is a need for a closer examination of the methodology used that may be more effective in predicting the theory of planned behavior. The articles did obtain pertinent information with their studies, however, to gather ethical results. Just a few limitations. Archival records are very, very critical. A few of the research studies that I looked at gathered some data from 2004 to 2006. None of my studies that I looked at with archival records, none of their hypotheses were proven. On to the surveys and questionnaires, which were used by the original people, the original researchers that brought up the theory of planned behavior, Olson and Ireland, 2011. Every single study that I looked at, if they used a survey and questionnaire, every hypothesis was proved. I will say that that brought me to a research question. Would the theory of planned behavior be more effective in predicting behavior using archival records or surveys and questionnaires given to prison inmates? Now, we have to think about a timeline too. However, that was the very first thing where I thought possibly we need a big major area of future research. In conclusion, the presentation reviewed some of the research that has been done on prison inmates' beliefs, attitudes, motivational factors, and demographics that contribute to prison aggression, environmental strain, and different types of adaptation. The theory of planned behavior is important in the prediction of behavior and could add to the understanding of why there is so much violence behind the prison walls. One of the things in summarizing the changes that have taken place in research, again, is that we only get bits and pieces of what we really need with the archival records and the questionnaires. The absence of data from either one would prove the theory of planned behavior and suggest the need for future research, especially when there are thousands of inmates being killed in the prison system each year. Thank you for listening. This concludes my presentation, and as time permits, I open the floor for questions and comments.